This is the word of God for today. Now Mary stood outside the tomb crying. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb and saw two angels in white seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and the other at the foot. They asked her, "Woman, why are you crying?" "They have taken my Lord away," she said, "and I don't know where they put him." At this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not realize that it was Jesus. He asked her, "Woman, why are you crying? Who is it you are looking for?" Thinking he was the gardener, she said, "Sir, if you had carried him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will get him." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned toward him and cried out in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said, "Do not hold on to me, for I have not yet ascended to the Father. Go instead to my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, and to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went to the disciples with the news, "I have seen the Lord." And she told them that he said these things to her. This is word of God. You may be seated. Today I want to begin my sermon with actually a story, okay? And story of actually one of the wisdom that my mom has shared with me. So I'm Korean, so my mom's Korean, so our family is Korean, right? So regardless of what you guys have heard about Asian drivers, my mom is actually a pretty good driver, right? I reflect more of an Asian driving experience, but my mom actually, she drives really well. Matter of fact, like whenever she drives, especially the turns, she makes one of the smoothest turns that I have ever experienced. So my mom actually has this unique habit. Whenever she's driving, whenever there's a car in front of her, like she always verbally like thank God, right? And especially even when this car like cuts her, you know, I'm Christ follower, so when somebody cut me, like I don't say some things, but in my heart I may have said some things, right? But then my mom actually, she will thank God verbally. So when I was young, you know, I was curious. So I'm like, "Mom, like, why are you thinking God, he just cut you, right? And you can't let him do that. You gotta cut him back," kind of thing, right? Because I was young, like, I'm getting competitive, right? But then she said, "You know what? Maybe it's a reminder that that sometimes I just need to follow. You know, before I was just by myself. Now I have somebody to follow, and I can go with the traffic of the flow. My life got easier." So I'm like, "Mom, that's such a lame response." You know, that's what I thought when I was young, right? And now that I have gotten a little older, you know, I really see tremendous wisdom in that. Because this is like what actually happened yesterday. Yesterday, there actually, guys, as you guys now know, that I'm running, right? And so every Saturday morning, I joined a club. Not that kind of club, but a running club, right? I joined the club, and so they they go to a certain place, meet up at a certain place at 7 a.m., and they run for an hour and 30 minutes. So there was like 9-mile running, right? And so I'm pretty new to this club, right? And so when I got in there, when I parked my car, as I was getting out, you know, I'm a dude too. I can get pretty competitive. So as soon as I got on my car, this is what I'm doing. I'm sizing up. Like, who am I faster than, right? And also, who do I see as a person that I cannot never catch, kind of thing, right? And so I got out, and I saw the crowd, and they all look faster than me. And so I got really intimidated, right? This was my second time. And so I still wanted to have the mindset, I still had the mindset of I want to make a good impression. Like I really want to impress them, right? But then as I was kind of thinking about like a little bit of my insecurity, I start to think like, what do I really want to do? Like, who do I want to follow? Who do I want to run with, right? And so as soon as when the run started, I had to really accept the reality that they're indeed actually all faster than me, right? And this is like, it's a long hour and 30-minute run. And so basically the instruction of the organizer, he said, we are going to do an easy run. So just for some of you, we may not know that term. So in running, easy run means you run, and the kind of the speed that you run, you are actually able to have a full conversation with the person next to you. That's what easy run is, right? And so I'm thinking about my easy run, but then I'm like, you know what? I still don't want to be the last person, right? So I'm sizing them up. And then I realized that their easy run is very different from my easy run. I actually want to show you my quote-unquote ugly photo. Like this was me. That is the face of a man who is running very hard, right? As you can tell, if you try to talk to me, I won't be able to talk to you because I am running as hard as I can. That speed, I'm showing you this to give you a demonstration. Like that speed was their easy run. Like there was no way for me to catch them up, right? And so there were these two guys who were running very last. Okay? And then now I'm like, I don't want to be last. You know, but like, is there a person that I can run a little bit faster so that I don't have to say I was the last? But then a thought came to me. Some of the wisdom that my mom taught me. And the thought was, Daniel, why don't you just thank God that there are people who are actually running at your pace, right? So first I refused that thought. I'm like, I'm better than this. I refused that thought, and I tried to run faster than that. But eventually, when that thought came to me once again, and I thought to myself, you know what? Let's give it a try. And so, as I was running, I'm like, Lord, thank you. Thank you that there are these people that I can actually run with and I can follow, and they're actually running at my pace. And as soon as I start to think like that, actually what happened? Before, like my mind was all about like time and not being the last and being competitive. But as soon as I acknowledge that maybe God has placed these people in front of me, just in front of me so that I can follow, so that I can actually have a great time. And as soon as I thank God, some stuff starts to happen from my heart. I was actually able to see the scenery. Right? It was green and it was beautiful. And then as we were running, because it was easy pace, I was actually able to have a conversation with these people, right? And then I realized one, bad thing was that they weren't slow. It's just that they have a triathlon race next day, so they're just there to warm up, right? But regardless, I was just having a great time having a conversation. One person was a follower of Christ, and we were just talking about experience, and it was actually I really had a great time, right? And now, as I was kind of thinking about that when I got home, the thought came to me. I think our heart works like that. It works like a lens. When you start to put on the lens of insecurity, all we see is inadequacy within us. Right? But then when we put on the lens of gratitude, I feel like we are finally be able to see some of the beautiful things that God is doing around us, right? And so as I was reflecting that, this passage start to also make sense. So in this passage, you will see a story of Mary. And she is actually now thinking about, so this is a story of resurrection, but she's at a place where, as we have read today, even though Jesus has resurrected, she cannot really see the resurrected Christ, right? But I think we all been there too. Right? Life becomes busy. There are so many things that are happening. And sometimes we may have some lenses, but sometimes our lens get really crowded, right? It gets really foggy with concerns and the business of life. And sometimes we don't really know what we are seeing. So hopefully as we are going through this passage and seeing what happened to Mary, we'll be able to also see that God is already with us, God is around us, and that we are able to see God's beauty. And it's not from far, but it is actually around us. So this is actually how the story begins. And let me read it to you in verse 11. It says, "Now Mary stood outside the tomb crying. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb and saw two angels in white, seated where Jesus' body had been, one at the head and one at the foot. They asked her, 'Woman, why are you crying?' 'They have taken my Lord away,' she said, 'and I don't know where they have put him.'" Guys, now Mary has entered to the tomb, and her expectation at this moment was to see Jesus' dead body. Mary was kind of person that was actually healed from Jesus. And so she was so thankful that because she was healed from Jesus, and when Jesus was died, she kind of took it as her mission to take care of Jesus after he died. And so now she's at an empty tomb. So here she actually sees something really remarkable. She sees two angels. And Bible clearly says they were in white. You know what that means? Like when you go to the hospital, like you will see doctors wearing what? Like white coats, right? When somebody's in the hospital, they're wearing white coats, you're not going to ask twice thinking that is that actually a doctor, right? They are purposefully wearing a white coat to let you know that they are the doctors. So if you have any questions, you can actually come to them for advice or questions, right? And so in this era too, white clothing was not that common, right? It was only worn on certain occasions or from a very special people, right? And so the fact that there are people who are wearing white and sitting on Jesus' tomb, basically what angels were doing is, I want you to notice that something had happened. But here, Mary is unable to see that. Because of the worries, because of she's not seeing what she has expected, she cannot actually see what God had done, right? And so the story actually continues from here, right? And then angels, so they try to engage her with the conversation. Maybe having a conversation will help her. So they ask the question, "Woman, why are you crying?" And her response is, "They have taken my Lord away." And she said, "I don't know where they have put him." Guys, and this is, I think, what happens to a lot of us too. This context is clearly grieving. But I think we all have been the place where not only grieving, but our lens being so clouded with so many different types of thoughts, our concerns or just busyness of life, and just so many different things, right? And when that happens, not only that we cannot actually see what God is doing, guys, I think we also do have a tendency of thinking about worst possible scenario, right? Like the other day, my sister Facebook messaged me, and she's like, "Bro, can we talk?" Normally, I would think, yeah, what's up, right? But even for me, when I am busy, when my mind is occupied, when I'm going through so many things in ministry, in my personal life, even that text, when I receive that text, my mind immediately goes to the place where I'm thinking, "Oh no, what happened?" And then I'm afraid to have this conversation with her because I feel like she's going to tell me something really terrible, right? And I think this is what was happening in Mary's head. She was thinking about so many other things that even when she saw the miracle in front of her, she wasn't really able to see it, right? And this is why, as we are going through this series, we really emphasize the importance of rest and having a space for God. Because when we do not have space for God, I think our mind is so good at generating assumptions where we won't be really able to see what God is doing. And so now angels are in front of God, and she's not able to see the beautiful work that God is doing. And then story actually gets interesting. All right, so if she cannot see what is in front of her, what happens behind her, right? And that's the next part. It says, she turned around, and what does it say? She saw Jesus standing there. But Bible also said, but she did not recognize that it was Jesus. And verse 15 kind of gives us the context. It says, she thought that he was the gardener. This is the thing, guys. She is witnessing one of the greatest miracle in the history, right? Okay? And to make this thing clear, in front of her, this is the image. There are two angels in white. Not one, two angels in white. Behind her, there's risen Jesus. I mean, how obvious does one need to make this for her in order for her to get it, right? But then she was not able to really see what was happening around her. Why was that? Because her mind was fixated on one thing. She was looking for a dead body, right? And I think a lot of us, we get also stuck in that mode as well. I mean, a lot of times, even when God is doing great things, our mind easily go to a place where we are constantly thinking about the things that we have lost. It doesn't really matter what God is doing today, but sometimes our minds are so fixated on the things that what we have lost before. And so here, I think it's also a great reminder for us to really re-examine our hearts. Is God really speaking to us today? But are we just seeing God as some sort of gardener and angels as just two random people, right? And so I think this is something that we also need to tell ourselves. Our God is faithful. He is always around us. It's not that He's not showing up in our lives. Sometimes in our lens, there's so many things that are going on that we are not actually seeing what He is actually doing in our lives, right? And as I was thinking about this, I also wanted to think about this through the perspective of Jesus. Guys, did you know that Mary is the first person who has seen the risen Lord? And I thought about it, and it was really, I don't know, like my mind was like, I couldn't really comprehend it. Because, guys, I can be a petty person, okay? Let's say I'm not, but let's say I'm Jesus. They crucified me. Now I have risen. You know what I'm thinking? I'm thinking about, you know what was the Roman governor's name? His name, Pontius Pilate, who have ordered the crucifixion, and who have washed his hands, thinking that he's innocent. You know, my mind will go there and be like, I want to actually show up to Pontius Pilate and say, so, how is it going now? Still washing your hands? You know, sometimes like my mind goes there so because I want to prove them wrong and I want to make the point that I was right? But guys, like, this is the thing. We spend so much of our lens, so much of our emotional capacity to think about those people, like I guess haters, right? We want to somehow prove them wrong to say we were right? But Jesus does not function that way. What Jesus actually have chosen is He wanted to show up for the person who was showing up for her, right? He really wanted to honor the person who was showing up for her. He wasn't going to disrespect the person who are actually genuinely wanting to show up for Him, right? Because if you actually read the entire gospel, Mary is not the main character. You know, there are disciples and there are actually big names that you can read from the Bible, but like even in John, this is the only place where her story kind of pops up. If you know a little bit about Mary, like her story is written in actually Gospel of Luke, and there's like one verse. She had 7 demons, and Jesus went there, and He cast them out, and she was healed. That was the one line, right? But this is what Mary did. She was so thankful, right? And so she actually, as you read the gospel, like you will see that she actually was at a place when Jesus was going through a difficult time. She was there at under His feet when Jesus was crucified, and when all the disciples have run away, and she was also there when Jesus was buried, when all disciples have run away. And now, when He was buried, now she's showing up because she also really wanted to honor Him. Even though she's not really able to really see Him, what God is really doing, but she is showing up. And I think Jesus is honoring that, right? Because a lot of times when we show up to a church like this, I think we have this pressure of wanting to be right? More than just showing up. Like we want to put our acts together, we want to make sure the night before we have done the right things, and so that when we walk into the church building, like we will feel kind of like guiltless and we'll be able to really praise God. But guys, as you can see, Mary came here to look for a dead body. She came for all the wrong reasons. But Jesus did not disrespect that. Matter of fact, what Jesus is going to do here from this story, she's not going to rebuke her. He's actually going to help her to see what actually have happened, right? And here, it's really, really interesting. I think Jesus was being very gentle, but a little funny too, because this is actually what Jesus asked her, right? Jesus says, "Woman, why are you crying?" Do you remember this question in verse before? That's what angels asked, right? So this is, I think, what I'm imagining what was happening. So angels were there, and then Mary was crying, and she couldn't recognize that they're angels. And now angels like, "Woman, why are you crying?" Meaning like, we are angels. Like, what? Look at us, and have it together, kind of thing, right? And then now, behind her, now Jesus showed up, and then I can almost see. So she looked at him, right? And she didn't get it. And so now she turned back. So I can kind of see like angels going like this. She didn't get it. She didn't get it. And Jesus is like, "Okay, let me try this too. Why, woman, why are you crying?" And then the next part is even more sweeter. He says, "Who is that you're looking for? Who are you looking for?" Like it's almost he's pointing at himself with that question, right? But then Mary still does not get it. So Jesus will do what only he can do. And I think this is how Jesus actually shows up in our spaces as well. And this is what the next verse says. He simply says, Jesus said to her, "Mary." And she turned to him and cried out in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Here, Jesus doesn't try to teach her about theology. Here, Jesus does not teach her about, why she couldn't get it. He simply calls her name. And guys, one thing that I also have learned in this community is when you guys actually address people, one another, sometimes I feel like there is just more than just you. Like names are more than just addressing people. Like whenever I'm being also addressed by you guys, I feel a lot of affection. And I'll give you some examples. In this community, my name's Daniel, but I'm rarely called by my name, right? I'm often called by some of the things I can give you. Like some people call me, and there's the emphasis, Pastor Daniel, okay? There's emphasis on that pastor. And I really respect that, and I really value that. You know what that tells me? I know what I look like, and I know, you guys probably have seen me as a person who came from a different culture and who's kind of trying to understand what walking in life is. But the fact that when you guys see me, when you say, Pastor Daniel, I see that as you guys trying to serve me to say, I respect you as pastor. So don't second guess about yourself. Be our pastor, right? So I receive that, and I really appreciate that, right? And sometimes, I don't know, my name's Daniel, but sometimes people just call me Cho, right? I'm like, I have a name, I like my name. But I guess sometimes when you just call the name, I feel like you feel less affectionate, right? So a lot of people here actually call me Cho, right? And then some other people call me Dicho. And I actually like that too, because I'm Daniel Cho, so I like to preserve my name in some way or form. And so when they say Dicho, I'm like, okay, that's cool, right? And even some other people too, they call me by different things. Like Juan, whenever he addresses me, in his description of what I did, he actually says Cho. But when he talks to me, he calls me bro, right? I mean, bro is kind of the word that, we can be thrown out in so many different ways. But because our context, because of the things that we have been through, when he says bro, I understand what that means. So I often call him bro as well. And also, when Mario calls me, sometimes he calls me mijo. And I also understand what that means. And I know a lot of people are being called mijo as well, especially, when you are very, a lot younger than the person, right? But I know it's not just a mijo, as in, you're just younger than me, but because we also have spent life together, when he says mijo, I understand where he's coming from, right? In a way that when we are calling each other with such an affection, it kind of has that impact to grab our attention. It is as if sometimes when we are so occupied with our thoughts, when we don't really have any space for other people to really speak into our life, whenever we speak through the relationship and affection, sometimes I think this is what happens. It really bypasses our brain, right? And then it goes straight into our heart, right? And when that happens, it's not just we are not physically turning around, but our hearts, it gets turned around. And we are beginning to see different things. And I think this is what's happening in this passage. When Jesus said, Mary, that's exactly what she had to hear. And can I go a little deeper? So this is why, I went to school for 4 years. So here it says, she turned around towards him and cried out in Aramaic. So that is their language, spoken language, okay? And she said, Rabboni, which means teacher, like rabbi, but in her language, dialect, right? And so here, I just want to capture this intimate moment. Guys, in English translation, it says Mary, because that's her name. That's not wrong, right? But then I'm like, if she responded to Jesus, Rabboni, there's no way that Jesus actually said Mary. And hear me out. So Mary, if you read in Greek, the original language of the Bible, it's actually pronounced as Maria, okay? And I know a lot of people who speak Spanish. You guys also know Mary as Maria. So that's because that's Greek. It came from the Greek language, right? But so John, who is writing this book, actually he is also bilingual, or like a lot of us here. He speaks both Aramaic and he also writes in Greek, right? And so whenever he's writing the story of Mary, he actually writes in Greek, so he says Maria. Right? But in this moment, I'm like, when Jesus tells her Mary, I have a suspicion that it's not Maria. So I looked into it. And you know what it actually says? It says Miriam. He was calling her in her own language, and John was being intentional about capturing that moment. Right? Names are not just names. Names really carry how you relate with that person. If I hear something like, Yonghoya, that's my Korean name, right? I will look. Even in the middle of my sermon, I will look because only my mother calls me that, right? So like that name calling has a way of really grabbing our attention. And in this story, Jesus is making sure that he's making himself known, not by theology, not by what is right or wrong, not by correcting her, but through relationship, right? And this is why our God is so beautiful. Before we are able to see who he is really for, he will always create that space in relationship so that we can really see him first, and therefore through that we are able to see all the beautiful things that he is doing. By the way, just want to also say one thing too. I know some of you call me Chino or Chinito, That tells me two things. Either you have no idea who I am. Nobody here calls me Coreano. I want to put it out there, right? Or you know me really well to a point where you can be funny, right? So I just want to put that out there too. But here, I think what we can really see is how Jesus is approaching Mary. And I want to bring that also in today's application as well. Like, what does that look like for us today? What does it look like for us to experience God calling our names? And I can share my example. I don't know about you, but I can share my example. Guys, I like seeing sunsets. I like seeing sunset because I think it is beautiful. But then if you really think about it, that sun just going down. It does not have to be beautiful. But then the fact that sunset is so beautiful, that tells me that God understands beauty. And he wanted to make sure that when I see it, that I was able to see the beautifulness of his creation, right? So as I'm just looking into this nature and the sunset, I'm thinking, Lord, this is really beautiful. And I really appreciate the fact that you understand beauty. And I feel this sacred connection with God, right? And so this is something that I also want to encourage you. You cannot do this unless we slow down and we actually create space for Christ, right? Sometimes, this also happens too. As we are driving, sometimes there's that worship songs that comes up. It was just a song that you may hear 1,000 times. But there are those times when those songs really also start to speak to you. When those times actually do happen, I really also want to encourage you, really be in that moment. really appreciate God's presence, because I think God is also trying to show himself to you in a way that you can understand. And I'm very sure there are multiple ways. Sometimes if you're a mother, when you see your child and smiling, I'm very sure it's just more than just a smile. Right? There's something deeper in there, like that beautifulness of life, the gift that God has given to you. Like there's just so many things that God has planted around us so that we can actually see who Jesus is and how beautiful he is, right? And so as we are bringing this conversation together, I actually want to show you once again one passage that will sort of summarize what we've been talking about today. So that actually comes from 1 Kings chapter 19. And it goes something like this. It says, "Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper." Guys, our God is faithful and he doesn't change. This is his character. He's not yelling at us. He's not coming to us like as Korean parents, they come us with a stick. That's not what he's doing, right? He wants to do life with us, and so rather he would come with a gentle whisper. And you know what it means that God can communicate with us with gentle whisper? It means he is actually close. If he's far from us, his gentle whisper will not do anything to us because we cannot hear, right? But the fact that God engaged our relationship with a gentle whisper tells me that he's always in that distance. But we are always trying to find God in the wrong places. We are trying to see the earthquakes. We are trying to see the fire. We are trying to see all this wind and these great, grandiose things. And we are trying to find God in those places. And maybe sometimes God does show up in those powerful ways. But, guys, the most beautiful things are not far away. They are right with you because God wants to do his life with you. And he also wants you to recognize that all the things that he has created is created in a beautiful way for you to appreciate and enjoy. So guys, today, as we wrap up this series, I really hope that we'll be able to come to a place where we're not trying to seek God's beauty in other places, in other people's lives, but I hope that we'll be able to have this courage and patience to see and seek his presence around us, and so that we'll be able to see all the beautiful things that he's doing with us and for us and always are going to be with us. So with that, let's pray.